So back to Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey also, in his most controversial thing, he encouraged African Americans to go back to Africa. Marcus Garvey, I believe, was a Jamaican immigrant. Eventually, he was arrested um, and deported to Jamaica. One odd thing about Marcus Garvey, he was one of the early leaders of civil rights movements, although he went further than most civil rights people at that time by asking them to return to Africa. And that was a difficult thing for a lot of African Americans to do because they didn't, none of them spoke any languages in Africa. None of them had ever been to Africa. They were usually fourth or fifth generation Americans at that time. But he did like to play dress up. He was not in the military, but he used to drive around Harlem dressed like this. And he also dressed his family up. And here are his wife and two boys dressed up like they were in the military, and they weren't. So, kind of a strange guy. And finally, the Red Scare in Russia. After the Russian Revolution, which happened during World War One, the Bolsheviks, which means the majority, were in charge. The peasants, the ordinary people, were in charge. Here's a big rally after they got rid of the Tsar. The Bolsheviks, who would become the communists, put all the farms, factories, and land and transportation systems under the control of the government. There they are with their army. They were led by this guy, Vladimir Lenin, who was greatly influenced by the writings of a German named Karl Marx. Now, Vladimir Lenin was a communist. The Bolsheviks were his group that took over the country, but they're all communists, and this is going to become a communist country. And in communism, a government controls all the money, all the land, all the farms, all the jobs, everything. So Russia went from being a monarchy with a czar, who's kind of like a king, to a communist country. Oh, change the slide. The USSR, which we'll talk about for almost the rest of this semester, which is called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was formed. They didn't call it Russia anymore. It was called the USSR. A communist country led by these three guys, Molotov on the right, Lenin in the middle, and Stalin on the left. The government owned all the land and property, divided it up amongst the people. There was no elections. One party was in control, the Communist Party. It chose leaders for different parts of the government, for different areas of the country. The needs of the country took priority over the individual needs of its citizens. That's also flip-flopped. In a democracy, your individual rights supersede the needs of your country. Your individual rights, like freedom of speech, are guaranteed. What the Communist Party wanted to do, what Lenin wanted to do specifically, was spread the communism around the world. He wanted to spread this and this was a real fear for the United States at this time. We're going to change the slide now. And this led, because we knew he wanted to spread communism around the world, it led to fears that he was going to be spread here. There was an active Communist Party here. It ran people for president. That led to the Red Scare, where Americans were scared that communists were trying to take over here. Here you see European anarchists with bombs and knives standing behind the Statue of Liberty with the tagline, "Come unto me, ye oppressed." Well, sometimes the oppressed are angry, so we had lots of people coming in this country. Bombs were sent by mail throughout the U.S. Because those bombs were sent by mail, that heightened the fear that there was a communist threat. Communists, socialists, and anarchists were arrested around the country and deported to the countries they came from. Sacco and Vanzetti were immigrants who were sentenced to death. They were accused of participating in a robbery. They were both anarchists. There they are at the top. Many believe that they were arrested for their beliefs, not for the crimes that they were accused of, and they were both sentenced to death. And they kind of became heroes for this time period. But there was a real fear. The Red Scare is about this. There was a real fear amongst most Americans that the communists were plotting to take over the country. The communists were coming here to take over, and it was not going to be easy, and it was going to be bloody. All right, that is the end of the first lecture of Unit 4.